Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for being here and practicing this session together. We're going to continue on with our discourse of the Lankavatara. And to help elucidate, I cite this old case. Listen. From the Gateless Gate. Master Yunmen's The Sound of the Bell. Master Yunmen said, "See, look how vast and wide the world is. Why do you put on your 7-piece robe at the sound of the bell? See how vast and wide the world is. Why, noble one, do you put on your robe at the sound of the bell?" The verse. With realization, all things are one family. Without realization, everything is disconnected. And without realization, all things are one family. With realization, all things are disconnected. Now, this verse is very appropriate because it's talking to us about what it means to practice, what it means to engage in the Buddha Dharma. And when that world being vast and wide is said, oftentimes people think of it probably in terms of pleasing and delightful things. Oh, you could be at Cedar Point riding the Ferris wheel. You could be in Vegas going for the slot machines. You could be at the concert listening to whatever kind of music you think would be fun to hear. But actually, the vast and wide world also includes the calamities and the traumas and the difficulties, the missteps, the mistakes, the wars. See how vast and wide the world is. See all the delights, and also notice all of the terrors, all the things that line up so enticingly beautiful and all the things that just will not be what they should be. Notice how vast. How vast is the amount of things that aren't correct, in your mind's opinion. So in the midst of this vast world, why do you put on that robe at the sound of the bell? Well, the Lankavatara begins in chapter 10 with a discussion of the lineage of the Arhats. The question comes forth this way. Mahamati, our familiar by now protagonist, asks the Buddha, "Pray tell us, how many kinds of disciples are there?" I got one for you, coach. How many kinds of disciples are there? The quick answer comes quickly. Well, there are as many kinds of disciples as there are individuals. And the sutra could have left it alone, but no. Oh no, it wouldn't be so simple. See how vast and wide the enumerations of disciples are. The Blessed One says, there are as many kinds of disciples as there are people. This phrase, this line is worth lingering on before we look at the next because, you know, we have ways of organizing ourselves and the space and the way we relate to each other. Tomorrow there'll be a rite of passage that, if successful, will result in a change in the color of a rakusu. The shuso will then be burdened with carrying around this ponderous fan. There's the ceremonial problem fan, and then there's the daily life problem fan. Congratulations. And so, there's the kind of disciple that carries around the problematic fan. That's a kind of disciple. There's a kind of disciple that wears a black robe or a gray robe or a rakusu or neither. or maybe funny colored ones. That can happen too. And so you can get the idea that, oh, I need to be like that. I need to look that way. I need to do what it is that those people are doing so that I can have the cool thing too. I too want the burdensome fan. I want the sweet looking robe or whatever it is. And you know, we do that stuff knowingly. We could choose differently, folks. We really could. We could all just show up in shorts and a t-shirt and call each other by our given first names and just hang out. But experience has shown, studies have revealed, long wisdom has been hard won that says, you know, if you do that, you get a nice hangout. But development and training doesn't occur. And so we have to create skillful means for ourselves and for each other. And the thing is, we have to take them seriously or they don't work. In and of themselves, there's nothing inherently too serious about it. But if we don't take them seriously, it won't work. But taking it seriously doesn't mean trying to become someone else or to become something else. Exactly the mind and body that you have and that you are right now is perfect and complete and lacks nothing. And still, some training would be good, don't you agree? And so together, at the sound of the bell, we agree. We come in this way, not that way. We sit facing this way, not that way. We bow like so, not like thus. Not because some cosmic Buddha is keeping score of your pious behavior, but because we need a way in. This is a unique perspective to my experience anyway. And I think because we hold it lightly, we can actually hold it up better. It seems to me in my experience that no matter how solemn the occasion, there's always something of a twinkle in the eye in my teacher. I remember seeing that a long time ago and going, how do you get that twinkle in the eye? Because my eye isn't twinkling very much. So, while the Buddha could have said, well, look, there's as many kinds of disciples as there are practitioners. Look around you. And he did say that. Then he continued on and said some other things. Mahamati asked, pray tell us, Blessed One, how many kinds of disciples are there? The Buddha replied, there are as many kinds of disciples as there are individuals who practice. But for convenience, we can divide them into two groups. And here the first division comes along. Disciples of the lineage of the Arhats and disciples known as Bodhisattvas. Now, keep in mind, the Lankavatara is part of what's called the Prajnaparamita literature. It's the discourses of the heart of wisdom, the perfection of great noble wisdom. So it's the defining quality of the Mahayana, right? An arhat here is a term that's used to describe a certain stage of development and practice as distinct from a bodhisattva stage in development and practice. Now this distinction is not universally agreed to. The Nikaya Pali tradition folks don't take bodhisattvahood as a stage to be considered. And so this is very much a commentary about approaches to practice. And the Lankavatara places its bet pretty clearly. So let's listen. The convenience says that we can divide folks into two groups, disciples that are in the lineage of Arhat and disciples that are known as Bodhisattvas. Now, disciples in the lineage of the Arhat may be considered in two different aspects. First, you can think of them in terms of the number of times they will return to this life of birth and death And second, you can think of them according to their spiritual progress. Now, this delineation of classification according to number of times returning goes back to some of the earliest texts we have in Buddhism. Clearly, wherever the Lankavatara actually came from, the author or the community of people that crafted it, is pretty clear. They had familiarity with the earlier Buddhist traditions, and so they're here acknowledging them in this way. You'll find these kinds of descriptions in the Pali Canon. And so the Lankavatara acknowledges them. Under the first aspect, that is the number of times they'll be rebirthed or reincarnated, really it's rebirthed. And then second, according to their level of spiritual development. And these interrelate. Now, under the first aspect, they may be divided into three groups. This is the number of times returning. Maybe you've heard these terms somewhere in your Dharma reading adventures. The stream entrance, the once returning, the never returning. Curious, anyone heard these terms? Put a hand up if so. No, more than a few of us. Okay. Quickly said, stream. Okay, the stream entrant. This is describing someone in the Buddhist tradition who has entered the stream of the Dharma. Now, someone who's entered the stream of the Dharma, it is said, is safe from ever leaving that stream. It's going to be a while. It's a big project. This isn't going to get built in a day. But they're guaranteed not to ever lose touch with the stream of practice. This is a beautiful thought. This is a beautiful idea. This is a worthy place to be. It points out, if nothing else, that it's quite possible for people to actually attain some experience in the path and then just regress and fall away from it. This happens. But it's possible there's a certain kind of person that gets deeply enough connected to the Dharma that even if they stop formally practicing, they never really stop practicing. And in this rubric, they will be always reborn, they will always be rebirthed in a place where they can reconnect with their teacher, reconnect with the Sangha, and pick up where they left off. A very consoling thought. Now, the once returning is as it says. This is a person that somehow attains a deeper connection to the Dharma, so strong that they only have one more lifetime to deal with. You're almost there. One more life ought to do it. Back in the oven. Turn out the heat. But just one more life. And then there's the never returning. These are they who I've seen clear and through in this very life. But interestingly, in all of these, in the Arhat kind of rubric, it really has to do with how long until I'm done? Well, when am I done with all of this suffering business? And in a culture where reincarnation is commonly accepted, and in fact, a prime motivation for many people is how do I stop this pain? How do I get off this wheel of constant suffering and difficulty? What is my way out? The question is, how can I get out of here? And it's a good question. I understand the question. Now, there's other ways to think about these categories, but let's just leave them there for the moment. The big meta message to take is that there are different depths of encounter with the Buddha Dharma, and those different levels of encounter with the Buddha Dharma actually do matter, and they do have effects. The overall message is to say, probably don't be satisfied, and keep going. Now, the text fills this out a little bit. It spells these things out a touch. The stream entered are those disciples who, having freed themselves from the attachments to lower discriminations, and who have cleansed themselves from the twofold hindrances, and who clearly understand the meaning of the twofold egolessnesses, yet who still cling to notions of individuality and generality and to their own ego-ness. These will advance along the stages up to the sixth, but there they will succumb to the bliss of the samadhis. They will be reborn 7 times or 5 times or 3 times, the sutra hedges its bet a little bit, before they will be able to pass through the 6th stage of training. The once returners are the arhats, and the never returners are the bodhisattvas who have reached the 7th stage. So, those who cling to notions of individuality and generality, but they've got some entrance here. The sutra says they've cleansed themselves of the hindrances. They understand the meaning intellectually of twofold egolessness. A lot of good stuff going on there. And yet, subtly or not subtly, they still cling somehow to notions of individual selfhood. There's still some kind of cramp in the mind around the idea or experience that it labels as self. And this is the reason why they've got more work to do. The reason for these gradations is that because of attachment to the degrees of false imagination, they are needed. Further hindrances are faith and moral practices, doubt, and the view of their individual personality. When these 3 hindrances are overcome, they will be able to move forward into higher stages. That might sit a little funny. Moral practices, it sounds like a good thing. Chikai is a big deal. The paramitas matter. Are they suddenly, is this a case for crazy wisdom? To throw all moral teaching out the window and just go crazy? To demonstrate your enlightenment? Big reveal, no. Rather, let's unpack a little bit, okay? As to moral practices, the sutra states, the ignorant, the simple-minded disciples, they obey the rules of morality and piety and penance because they desire to gain worldly advancement and happiness, with an added hope of being reborn in a favorable condition someday. This way of relating to the moral practice, what the sutra is pointing out is that the motivation for the practice is very important. So if I engage in, let's say, some wholesome activity because I've got a deal-making mind, I'm going to make a deal here. I'll be well-behaved here, but you're going to owe me there. I'll be wholesome here because it'll lead to more wealth for me, or more happiness for me, or more health for me, or more goodies in my basket. And the sutra says it's not enough just to behave morally, ethically okay. It's necessary to have right intention and right motivation. And anybody that practices here even a small amount of time, you're constantly under the pressure of set intention, dedicate the merit. Set intention, dedicate the merit. Set intention, dedicate the merit. This hopefully sinks into the marrow. We don't just move through the day in some kind of bizarre automaton level. It's not just instincts and gears playing out. You don't just learn how to function correctly and then just let it play itself out. Instead, there's a constant interrogation. Why? What is your intention? There are certain moments where it is said, you have sat long through the day and night. Why are you here? What is your motivation? What is your intention for this? And the sutra holds this up very clearly. The stream entrance ones do not cling to moral practices for any hope of reward, for their minds are fixed on the exalted state of self-realization. The reason they devote themselves to the details of morality is that they wish to master such truths that are in conformity with the sutra. They wish to align their minds with reality. They wish to be in conformity with the undefiled non-outflowings, or the undefiled outflowings. This is speaking of a very different motivation. I wish to engage in my life morally and wholesomely because that's the mind of awakening. Not because of what I'm going to get. Are you coming to session to get something? Are you sitting that period of Zazen to clock in points that you hope to cash in at some point for a big teddy bear? There's faster ways to get a teddy bear. More sure ways of getting a teddy bear. In fact, we have no teddy bear waiting for you. Sorry. But if you sit because you wish to realize your life and your death, if you wish to realize and perfect the life of the cosmos now appearing as you, well, then you're in the right place. Now, the sutra goes on, as regards the hindrance of doubt in the Buddhist teachings, this will continue so long as any of the notions of discriminations are cherished, but they will disappear as soon as those cherishings disappear as well. In other words, the sutra is saying, if you're encountering the Dharma and there's some doubt that's rising in you, it may well not be because of the Dharma, but rather because of this unhealthy clinging to self and to ego. And that's why it feels maybe not like, oh, I'm not sure about this. Look inside. Where are the attachments? I've had occasion on this retreat to tell many folks the story of how I used to really obsess and stress over concerts when I had to play them. Irritating fact, because I've not as many concerts as Anken has to play, but I have a few. So I could spend my entire life stressing about the next concert. And I did for a long time. You're only as good as your next gig, you know. Not the one you just did, the one upcoming. But somewhere along the line, I realized, you know, the gigs basically go fine. No one's dies or anything. You know, the music gets played. People like it or they don't. Whatever. It's okay. You know, I have a reasonable enough capacity. And actually, all of this stress and strain and worry, it's not helping anything. It really doesn't help. I used to think that that was the currency of showing that I was a sincere musician, is raking myself over the coals because of a concert. Isn't that what you do? Practicing, yeah. Getting ready, sure. You know, being ready to do your part at the rehearsal, sure. But actually that internal grind, completely optional, as it turns out. I know it's coming. I know it needs attention. There's a lot of competition for my time. I'm going to squirrel some away here and there and make it work. And then I don't have to think about it any more than that. I can just let go of the clinging to the notion that I have to suffer over this. And so I did. I just quit doing that. I made a conscious practice. And for a while, I had a mind training slogan. I don't stress about concerts. I enjoy them. And every time that stress would come up, I would just repeat that mantra as much as I needed to. I don't stress about concerts. I just enjoy them. I don't stress about concerts. I play them. It just happens to be my profession. But after a little bit of training with this and a couple of concerts going just as well as they ever do, maybe a little better, now it's proof. I don't have to wonder if I have to rake myself over these coals. It's completely not needed. So it's not really the music that was stressing me out, it was me stressing me out. Does that make sense? Of course, you have to be able to play. You have to be able to do the job, whatever that is. So you can pull the analogy through in whatever way makes sense in your world. But there's a freedom that has nothing to do with learning this particular piece better. That's not the barometer that makes that pain go away, that suffering. There's a choice that can be made. I can decide simply to fast from that indulgence, this karmic habit energy pattern that serves neither me nor the music nor the audience. It's good for nothing but maybe my adrenaline count and my anxiety level. And so doubt in the Dharma is probably not actually about the content of the Dharma that you're encountering. It's probably something underneath. And that's what the sutra says. Subtly or overtly clinging to notions of separate self and individuality will cause this friction to be there. As regards the hindrance of doubt in the Buddhist teaching, this will continue so long as any notions of discrimination are cherished, and will disappear when those discriminations disappear. It doesn't say, these doubts occur until you've thought it through sufficiently enough, and they will disappear once you've thought it through clearly. It's not what it says. You need to be able to think it through clearly, but you can have it as clear as a bell and still stress yourself out over it. Right? Like I can. I can play the thing just fine, and I can rake myself over the coals anyway. It's not about that. Attachment to the view of individual personality will be gotten rid of as the disciple gains a more thorough experience and understanding of being and non-being, self-nature and egolessness, thereby getting rid of the attachments of their own selfness that goes with these discriminations. By breaking up and clearing away these three hindrances, the stream-entered ones will be able to discard all greed, anger, and delusion. That sounds pretty good. So when you're sitting, and let's say you're experiencing some challenge or some difficulty in your practice, if that's true, I would ask you to look under the hood of the difficulty that seems like it's presenting itself to you. What is the condition that's allowing this difficulty to arise? And instead of just trying to chop all the weeds off from the top, what happens if you pull them up from the root? What is that root of suffering? You won't solve it just by gutting out another period of zazen. That won't do it. But if you use that period of zazen to drop the delusive thinking that's holding you hostage to yourself, literally yourself, you'll find something quite else can open up. And there's still the pressure of the gig. There's still practice that needs doing. There's still a job that has to be done. And yet, it can be done in freedom and peace. The effort can actually be, dare I say, joyful. Still effort. Still effort, but a joyful effort. Now the next level here, this is all the entrance, stream entrance. This one is the once returning arhats. There was once in them the discrimination of forms and signs and appearances, but as they gradually learn by right knowledge not to view individual objects under the aspects of quality or qualifyingness, and as they became acquainted with what marks the attainment of the practice of jhana, they have reached a stage of enlightenment wherein one more rebirth, they will be able to put an end to the clinging of their own self-interests. Free of this burden of error and its attachments, the passions will no more assert themselves, and the hindrances will be cleared away forever. It's kind of interesting. It's pointing to the same root source every single time, isn't it? This essential misperception of the nature of the self. This one goof, this one misapprehension, everything tumbles from it. And therefore, the undoing of that misapprehension can completely interrupt all of that cascading foolishness. Imagine a society where everyone was not obsessed with their own self-interest. And then look around the room a little bit. Here we are. We're actually manifesting it right now. It's possible, see? And frankly, it's always been a nano-minority. So don't be surprised by that fact, even if it's a little shocking at times. Most folks really are just about themselves. The better of us in that category will extend it to people that they find very near and dear, with whom they'll also fight the most. But the list of others is long. Not so for the Arhat. Not so for the Bodhisattva. Now to close for today, I'm going to just read the lead-in because I like it so much. Under the second aspect, disciples may be grouped according to the spiritual progress they've attained. And we tend to think that way more than how many rebirths are you clocked in for. Seems to land a little easier for most of us. Grouped according to the spiritual progress they have attained into 4 classes, namely disciples, masters, arhats, and bodhisattvas. The first class of disciples mean well, but they find it difficult to understand unfamiliar ideas. I think I'll leave it there. The first class, well, the kids mean well, but you know. But you know, for us in our community, we use this word disciple in a very specific way. Very much descendant from Rinsen Roshii, by the way, whose memorial plaque you see before you here. Her successors, Kyogen and Gyokuko Carlson, they founded Dharma Reign in Portland, a very noble Sangha. Good practice there. Good, straight Soto practice. And they have this discipleship word that they use to describe a certain level of practice and a certain level of engagement. And you know, the word shuso is the Japanese inheritance, a chief disciple, the head monk, there's some other terms for it. But this word disciple is really apropos because it means someone who has entrance into the discipline of the tradition. That's really what it's about. It's not disciple in the sense of like a tech guru out on the West Coast with their disciples, you know, or the 12 following Jesus around or whatever. no. It means something, I think, a little deeper, actually. It means a direct personal connection, to be sure, but it hinges around this entrance into the discipline of the practice. And it takes a while, it takes a minute to really land whole body, mind, and heart into the practice. And to know how to actually conform and align oneself to the Dharma. If you're like most, you'll spend quite some time practicing in your own image without realizing that's what you're doing. Practicing in your own image without realizing that's what you're doing. And that's okay. That's a natural part of the process. But what happens is as you sink in, as your practice deepens, it's less and less your own opinions and ideas and feelings about things. And it's more about expressing the discipline of the Dharma itself. Now, eventually, this discipline motif itself becomes burdensome and useless, and we cast it off. But there's a time, a necessary time, when you must conform and align yourself to the discipline of the tradition. Because if we don't, we'll still be practicing out of that self-interest without knowing it. You see, having the rows this way and not that, and having the garb here as opposed to there, it sets us up in a way that we can actually run into the guardrails of our own trouble. Our ego has a chance to shine. Lucky you. Good for you. But your ego has a chance to shine in a place where you can actually see it, or at least you have the chance to. I hope we're providing enough opportunity for your silent reflection. But you have to be awake, right? You have to be really interrogating your practice and really engaging in your practice. If you get to one of those moments where you're just kind of drowsy, sleepily gutting it out, you have a choice. As soon as you recognize that drowsy, sleepy gutting it out is rising in mind, you're already at a different level of experience. The sense of elation, the sense of disgust, the sense of boredom, the sense of excitement, all are rising aspects of mind itself. So too even is the sense of yourself as a self. That's just another experience rising in mind. See that clearly. Really see that. Merge with that. Realize that that sense of self is just another sense, like I have the sense of the breeze on the back of my bald head right now, and the light shining in my eyes, and the sense of me as a self. They're all experiences arising in mind, seen of the mind itself. There's nothing that's an exception to that. And to get to that clarity, your mind has got to be disciplined, like for real. And I don't mean become Vulcan, but I mean just see what is actually so and manifest it. It begins to show. There are tells, There are signs, so to speak. It begins radiating. When Rinsen Roshii is here, clearly he's himself. You will not miss that if you're anywhere around him. He's definitely himself. And yet there's something else going on there. There's a deeper and fuller, vast context of no self within which the self arises. So may it be for us. May it be for you. And as we move into the phase which most of you are in, which is where you're acquiring this discipline, this capacity to merge and align yourself with the Dharma. Please make sure that your effort is honest, that you're actually paying attention to the most important thing. I could have spent the rest of my life stressing about these notes and then these notes and then these notes and this concert and that tune, and I could have spent the next however long I've got left to live raking myself over the coals every single gig for no reason other than that's what I'm used to doing. It's your choice, really. If you want to, you may go ahead. No one can stop you. But it's also possible to see past these unexamined assumptions. If you're sitting there and you're depressed or you're stressed or you're excited or disgusted or whatever, who is it that's having that experience? Where's this center? What is it that's really going on here? So may we all really take on the discipline. Don't get attached to it. Don't do it so that you get a gold star and a pat on the head. Don't do it so that you get a different colored robe. Do it because it brings freedom and it brings life to life, so that way you know how to hold it up and you also know how to set it down. For the sake of all beings throughout space and time, may it be so.
Shanti.